The more things change, the more they stay the same. Iran's new president has taken office, so should we expect a change in policy, as we often hope? And where does this leave Iran's nukes? Do join me, Jan Darasz, for How We Got Here.
1 or 2 weeks. That's how long Iran needs to develop a nuclear weapon, according to the US Secretary of State.
Well, they're moving forward in terms of the capacity to break out in producing fissile material. Yeah. We're looking very carefully at anything they might be doing on weaponization.
At the same time, the Middle East is on the brink of a major war between Iran and its arch-nemesis, the Jewish state.
The Zionist regime is not a state, it is a criminal gang. It is a gang of criminals, murderers and terrorists.
The two have already exchanged missile fire this year for the first time in history.
We meet today at a crossroads of history. Our world is in upheaval. In the Middle East, Iran's axis of terror confronts America, Israel, and our Arab friends. This is not a clash of civilizations. It's a clash between barbarism and civilization.
This makes the Middle East one of the major themes in the ongoing intense US presidential campaign. Kamala Harris has portrayed herself as a more moderate Israel ally than Joe Biden, which has been met with enthusiasm by her base.
I also expressed with the Prime Minister my serious concern about the scale of human suffering in Gaza, including the death of far too many innocent civilians. And I made clear my serious concern about the dire humanitarian situation there.
Under the Harris vice presidency, the US supplied Israel with weaponry and funds worth billions of dollars. But Donald Trump has immediately taken her words to the extreme.
She doesn't like Israel. That's the way it is, and that's the way it's always going to be. She's not going to change. Together with Joe Biden, she gave billions and billions of dollars to Iran and Hamas to fund their campaigns of terror. She gave them billions of dollars. They were broke. Remember, when I left, they were broke.
Trump boasts that under his administration, the US embassy in Israel was moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He pulled the US out of the international nuclear deal with Iran and ordered the killing of General Qasem Soleimani, the legendary commander of Quds Force, an organization analogous to both the CIA and US Special Forces. After taking office, the Biden administration has tried to re-establish the nuclear deal with Iran, but so far hasn't been able to. High tensions in the Middle East were not conducive to constructive dialogue. There's a chance that Harris might get the deal back on track, or at least try to.
Our guest today is foreign policy analyst Kacper Kita. Welcome to the programme.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Great to have you. First of all, the Iranian government or the Iranian state, a new president is taking office. Is it right for us to expect anything new in foreign policy or in domestic policy, looking at Iran from the outside?
Yes, certainly we can expect a shift. It won't be a revolution, obviously, but we may expect some shift, both in terms of foreign policy and domestic policy. When it comes to foreign policy, we will see a more engagement with the West. I expect more, at least an attempt to present the new president as a reformist who is willing to engage, to have constructive negotiations, both with the United States and with the European powers, especially since we can expect that the new foreign minister will be once again Mohammad Javad Zarif, who has been the foreign minister for 8 years under President Rouhani from 2013 to 2021, and who has been very important in Pezeshkian's campaign. He was one of the faces of his campaign because, Zarif has been under Rouhani the face of Iranians, this part of the Iranian ruling elite, who was the most willing to engage with the West, and at the same time he was very good, he was very well oriented in the West because he has lived in the United States for many years. He has a PhD from an American university. He speaks very good English, and he has been Iran's face for while once would say that he has been the Iranians' tool to present Iran as not actually such a dangerous regime. But at the same time, he is certainly a very skilled and very experienced diplomat. He was the leading negotiator for Iranian nuclear program, a Iranian nuclear deal with the Obama administration back in 2015, the JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. And we can expect that with Zarif, we will have a team of foreign policy experts and diplomats who have been working with these circles for many years. Zarif was also instrumental in legitimizing Pezeshkian domestically as a person who at the same time can win and can bring substantial change, because we have seen, for example, a very low attendance by the voters. In the first round it was only 39%, but in the second round, when it was when Pezeshkian actually acceded to the second round, the Zarif and Pezeshkian managed to bring 10% of voters, 10 percentage points voters more, up to a half of the population, which meant that people who were generally fed up with the government, with the regime, with the Islamic Republic, well, they decided to give it one more chance with Pezeshkian.
Yes, I mean, you portray him as this reformist team. In a theocracy, his room for manoeuvre must be extremely limited, given the nature of the regime in Iran.
Certainly, his room for maneuver will be limited. It is also important to point out that he is only second president after Ahmadinejad, and excluding the first president who was in office for a very short time, who is not a cleric. And this is also an important change. And he will have limited room for maneuver both with Supreme Leader Khamenei and with the military, with IRGC, with Islamic Revolution Guard, which is a crucial power broker in terms of military, but also economy and domestic power. And many will expect in the coming years that IRGC will want to impose even more power with Khamenei growing older and older.
So they're like the Praetorians who hold the key roles in the state.
They do, to a degree, yes. We have seen the shift from it's not only a theocracy, but also a system in which parts of the military play a very important role. And what is important is that with the Supreme Leader Khamenei, Ayatollah Khamenei being 85 now, we can expect that Pezeshkian may be the one to have to manage a transition, possibly only a second transition, if Khamenei dies at a certain point. We only had one transition in 1989 when Ruhollah Khomeini, the founder of the Islamic Republic, died and Khamenei was elected in his place. And this can be a very turbulent moment, possibly, ending 35 or 40 years of Khamenei's rule, depending on when he will die. And this will be very important to see what power structure will actually emerge from this, because we have a lot of tensions also inside the ruling elite. For example, during the previous more reformist government with Rouhani, for example, Zarif at a certain point resigned. He was forced to resign in 2019. Then he was brought back. So we can expect many machinations also between the different power centers. And Pezeshkian and Zarif will try to maintain the impression that they can actually bring change, so that they will maintain popularity, but at the same time, the room for maneuver will be limited. So we cannot expect, an actual big change in Iranian domestic policy. Perhaps some, for example, Pezeshkian in campaign criticized the morality police for being too tough on women, and we can expect that they will try to present themselves as more liberal would not be a good word, more humane, perhaps.
Yes.
But at the same time, we will see if they get a lifeline from Khamenei. I think that he may give them some lifeline, because if they remain popular to a degree, it means also that the regime itself remains popular. Bringing
it into the foreign policy sphere, What about Iran? What about the nuclear policy? Is it a case of just waiting for who wins in the White House in November to establish a strategic negotiating policy, or how do you see that happening?
Well, Iran has been a threshold country, and this meaning that they are able to have a nuclear weapon in a matter of weeks or perhaps
this is
months.
Breakout time, yes.
Yes, well, Secretary of State Antony Blinken just a few weeks ago said that in his estimation, Iran can get a nuclear bomb in a week or two, if it wants to. But at the same time, Iran wants to stick to the status quo so that to incentivize the West to negotiate and bring down sanctions. So we will see if there will be some attempt. Probably there will be no attempt to negotiate before the November election, because I suppose that Kamala Harris knows that it would be an easy target for her to negotiate with Iran, because Trump would attack her very harshly, that she's weak on terrorists, etc. But after November, I think in both scenarios we can expect that there is some room for negotiations. If there remains a democratic administration,
yes,
it's obviously more feasible then, because it was always the Democrats who were more prone to negotiate with the Islamic Republic. It was Barack Obama who managed to bring back with John Kerry and his team the JCPOA, and Trump himself is a very controversial figure, because not only it was him who terminated the previous nuclear agreement in 2018, which was negotiated by Obama, but also because Trump ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general, in 2020.
Terminated General Soleimani as well, I suppose. What is the, if I can just, sorry to interrupt you, can we move on to the wider foreign policy consequences or ramifications? What do you think will happen? Iran has its own policy in the Middle East, in northern Israel in particular, has this alliance with Russia, this military alliance with Russia. Is that likely to continue? Iran being in this camp of so-called Western enemies. Is that what the new president would like to change? How do you see that?
Well, I think the new president would like to have a wider room for maneuver. He would like to be able to engage with Western countries while maintaining relations with Russia, China. Regarding Lebanon, regarding northern Israel, these parts of policy are very much in the hands of the military of IRGC, because they are the ones on the ground who maintain ties with Hezbollah, for example, or with the Houthis in Yemen.
Yes.
But at the same time, obviously, Zarif and Pezeshkian will want to present themselves as those who are able to, at least to a degree, influence Iranian policy, for example, vis-à-vis Saudi Arabia. Even under the previous president, Raisi, who was widely seen as a more conservative, principlist president, it was able for them to negotiate a deal with Saudi Arabia, who at the same time, as we know, is an American ally. So I think they will try to widen the room for maneuver, but they will not. They are perfectly, I think, they know perfectly well that if they become too dependent on China and Russia, it is not good for their international standing. But they will have limited room for maneuver.
A final word. Do you think the rhetoric, the exterminationist rhetoric against Israel, will be toned down, or is it still a pillar of Iranian foreign policy rhetoric, at least?
Oh, I think that the anti-Israeli rhetoric will be maintained, because this is also something from the part of politicians who come now to power as presenting themselves that they are not weak. In the Israel is a country that has been attacking Israel has been very common in Iran since the revolution, and attacking Israel, or the Zionist regime as they would call it, is a way of presenting themselves that they do not they are not Western weaklings, but they maintain at least this part of the foreign policy. So I think that they will pay lip service to the anti-Israeli rhetoric. And we will see also what happens with Israel, with Gaza war, etc.
Sure. Final question to you. What about the European side? Europe's had its own nuclear, the EU rather, had its own nuclear policy with Iran. Is that going to continue, or is how do you see relations with the Iranian state and the European Union?
Yeah, I think that this is where we can expect perhaps more possibly change than with the relationship between Iran and Washington, because for the EU leaders were also the ones who were reluctant for Trump to leave the JCPOA. They wanted to preserve the old framework with Macron, but also Boris Johnson, for example, then British Prime Minister, trying to influence Trump not to attack Iran too harshly. They wanted, for example, him to go back to negotiations after he left JCPOA. So I think that this we will have a will, for example, to engage with Iran so that Iran would free some of the prisoners from European countries that Iran has. For example, we have a few French prisoners in Iranian prisons. So we will see if I think that there will be will on both sides to have some at least a little success that would be they would be able to present on both sides, that there's a sense in engaging, but at the same time there will be limits on that.
Well, I certainly think we'll all be watching the elections in November, including Iran. But thank you very much, Kacper Kita, for joining us. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me. Have a nice day.
Great to have you. So that's all we have time for today. Please do join us next time on How We Got Here.